Hi there, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Our first guest this morning is certainly taking an interesting path to a possible presidential bid, right through the administration, in fact, that he would be running against. Jon Huntsman recently stepped down from his position as U.S. ambassador to China, but before that, he was a popular two-term governor of Utah. But this week, he's here in New Hampshire, and we welcome him to the program and to the Grand Assembly. Good to see you. Thanks very much.
Great to see you.
So how you feeling? You've been here for a couple of days now?
I feel great.
Yeah?
This is an exhilarating experience, and I was comparing and contrasting it with where we've been for the last 2 years in China, where you can't very well go into somebody's home and talk politics and expect the media to show up and write and comment any way they choose and expect neighborhood people to show up and ask whatever question they want. This is so Americana to be able to entertain this process. And I watched it play out. I participated, I experienced it, and I thought, only in America can this happen. It's a very proud tradition you have here in the Granite State, and it's just a wonderful honor to be able to get a little glimpse of it early on.
Just from the moment that your name was brought up as a possible presidential contender, already questions started to surface because you worked as the U.S. ambassador to China under the Obama administration. Are you too moderate to actually appeal to the Republican base? And that's something that you're going to hear a lot.
People tend to throw tags around willy-nilly. And instead of tags, I would ask people to look beyond the veneer. Every elected official has a list of accomplishments. Some they'll like and others maybe not, but at least look at our track record and look at what we've done in terms of cutting taxes at historic levels, getting an economy on its feet to where it became the top economy in the country, the best managed state in America, somebody who probably understands the world maybe better than any other candidate in the race, and then make an informed decision based upon that. That's all you can hope for. In terms of serving this current administration, President Obama, I would tell you that when we're experiencing a time of war and a time of financial hardship in this country, for me, and based on every principle I was raised with, when your president asks you to step up and serve, and if it's a bipartisan position where you uniquely can bring about or make a difference, I'm the kind of person who's going to do that.
Well, do me a favor. I mean, talk about some of the moves that the president has made from your standpoint. A great amount for me. What are some of the successes that you think that he's had and his weaknesses?
I think he's a good communicator. I think he's doing his best to bring a new mood and a new attitude to the country. I think underlying all of that is our biggest challenge and biggest problem of all. And that's the fact that we've gone from $10 trillion in debt to $14 trillion in debt in just over 2 years. And if that doesn't spell the bottom line of what this next election cycle is all about, I don't know what will. So when you look at the trajectory of debt and where it has gone over the last 10 years, and you say that this is absolutely unsustainable, what it's doing to our dollar, how the falling dollar is having an impact on every family's quality of life and standard of living, and ultimately upon our economic competitiveness as a country. And either we say that we're willing to put up with that on the spending side, or that we're going to organize and get behind some people who want to bring a stop to it and talk honestly about what the fixes are.
Well, Governor, you talked about one of the fixes was the stimulus. You talked about debt and spending, but you weren't necessarily opposed to the stimulus bill.
Every governor, every CEO, every mayor of this country, with maybe the exception of one, was talking about, it was part of the whole stimulus debate. My part of the contribution in terms of the debate was, if it's going to be done, let's make sure that it's done right. And let's focus on tax cuts for corporations. Let's focus on payroll tax deductions. Let's focus on investing in our core infrastructure needs that will expand our foundations and allow us to then better able to compete going forward. That's transportation, that's power. There's so much in this country that needs to be upgraded and done. It was a perfect opportunity, instead of giving dollars to states for them to do with whatever they pleased, to have some targeted investments in our overall infrastructure that would have left us better able to compete going forward.
Obviously, China is closely tied to our economy, and it's also very closely tied to these campaigns moving forward. In your opinion, having been there, serving as the ambassador, is China, is it a U.S. ally economically, or is this a country that you think that the U.S. needs to look at with, I don't want to say skepticism, but cautiousness?
The U.S.-China relationship will always be part collaborative. It'll be part competitive, and it will be in large measure frustrating to the average American, because they will see where We are losing trade and competitiveness battles. They will look at China's military spending and say that it's going up and that they perhaps are going to be a threat longer term. I think in evaluating China, we have to look realistically at the challenges that they face. All we see in China is this upward trajectory, 8, 9, 10% economic growth rates per year with no end in sight, without realizing that they have their own leadership changes next year in the 18th Party Congress, where a whole new group is going to come to the forefront. And the question before them is what to do about inflation, which in years past has been a destabilizer for China. What you do about an economy that likely is not going to grow nearly what it has the last few years. What you do about a neighborhood that increasingly is growing disenchanted about the rise of China and becoming a lot more friendly to the West. What to do about corruption. What to do about your differing populations, either down in Tibet or far west in Xinjiang. There are lots and lots of challenges, all driven to the maximum by 500 million internet users and 80 million bloggers who are having conversations in today's world that people were never allowed to have in the past because they can. They can register their opinions for the first time in 61 years of China's history. And that is going to drive reform, and it's going to drive market openings, and it's going to drive a certain kind of behavior or reaction on the part of the party and the regime. And it's going to be very interesting to watch how this dynamic plays out in the next few years.
Another interesting comment you made this week centered on another part of the world, and that's Libya. And why don't you kind of explain your thought process here when you said, you know what, U.S. probably shouldn't have gotten involved, not probably, you said that U.S. should not have gotten involved at all when it came to the Libyan crisis.
That's right. I think we need to pick and choose our levels of engagement, our deployment patterns very, very carefully. And I think it must be based on, first, affordability. And in today's world, we need to be focusing on the core of our own nation. When our core is weak in our country, it means that it's that much harder to project a foreign policy. It's that much harder to engage in meaningful trade policy. So right here is where our focus ought to be, a little bit of nation building at home, if you will. Second of all, any decision like that should be a direct extension of our core national security interests.
But the argument made by the president was, you know, we had to make this move to stave off what could have been an enormous humanitarian crisis in Libya.
Well, there are a lot of those around the world. And if we wanted to respond to every such crisis in the world, we'd be out of dollars, we'd be out of members of the military, we'd be out of AID funds. So at this point in our nation's history, where our economy and jobs need to be the sole and exclusive focus, we need to make sure that we focus on the core, our nation's center, our economy, because if we keep going as we are, then our ability to do anything for anybody around the world is going to be put in jeopardy because we're not going to be able to afford it. We need to take a step back and look at the really transcendent foreign policy issues that are on the horizon that may take our involvement, like weaponization in Iran. What do you do when Iran all of a sudden develops a weapon of mass destruction over the next year to year and a half?
So what do you do?
Well, you better believe that Israel is going to approach probably desiring a preemptive strike, because if nothing is done, then Saudi Arabia is going to respond, Turkey is going to respond, Egypt will likely respond, even under new management. And that means you have proliferation concerns throughout the region, resulting in tremendous instability. Now, if ever there was a reason to consider using U.S. force, it would be in pursuit of situations like that.
Okay. When you take stock of this field, you look at it right now. I mean, so some people say that the Republican primary field, potential field, I should say, is flat. When you take a look at it, what do you think? You know what? I can bring this to the table that the other candidates can't. What are your strengths? What would you do differently?
I think there are going to be a few things that are going to weigh very heavily in the minds of voters ultimately, and we'll have to review this when the time is right, when we choose to get into this race. I think one is real governing experience. You know, what have you done, and what do you have to show for it? Governors typically have something to show for it when they've, been head of a state. Private sector experience. I think it's really important today, as our focus is jobs. Does that person understand the private sector and the environment we need in order to promote growth? 3, I think you want somebody who understands the world for what it is. This is increasingly a very dangerous and unpredictable world. And 4, frankly, I'm just tired of the division in this country. I'm tired of people yelling at each other. I'm tired of the polarization. And I'm going to stand tall for somebody who believes in civility. We can differ vehemently, but we ought to remember that the way in which we show respect one for another is an important part of the legacy that we're passing down to my kids and yours and the next generation coming up. And I think that's going to be a very important part of this debate. It's time that we come together as Americans. It's time that we focus on the big picture and remember that we have always been a preeminent nation, always a great nation because we're a good nation. And we've got some work ahead of us.
Governor, we have less than a minute to go. You said earlier before we started taping the program that, I'm not going to mess around with an exploratory committee. I'm either going to do this or I'm not. What kind of timetable have you set for yourself?
I think we're looking at the next several weeks, probably mid to the later part of June would be our decision-making period. We're doing the diligence that anyone would want to do, having conversations and looking at how you might structure, organize, and finance such an effort. It's a massive undertaking, and I'm very excited about it. I'm feeling good, and most importantly, my wife and kids are feeling pretty good about it.
Very good. Best of luck to you, Governor, moving forward. Thanks for joining us on the program. We'll see you again soon.
Thank you.